Hi, I'm Roger Aguinaldo, and welcome to the M&A Advisor podcast. Since 1998, the M&A Advisor has been the definitive source dedicated to recognizing achievement, delivering unrivaled thought leadership, and connecting the world's mergers and acquisitions elite. We help you sharpen your edge and accelerate your success in deal making. Whether you're an ambitious new player or a market veteran, this podcast provides masterclass strategies, unvarnished stories, and vital lessons from the industry's influential figures. Before we launch into this episode, be sure to follow us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, and subscribe to our essential M&A Alerts email newsletter. Find all the links below. Your engagement fuels the deal-making community. Now let's get into the transaction.
So I'm delighted to be able to introduce you to our 2025 Thomas Farrell Memorial Award winner, Jacob Voorhees, sitting right next to me. And I'm going to start by chatting with Jacob a little bit, but then I want to move on and chat with each of the team that we have here, because we're very honored to have four of, I think, the six original Memorial Award winners here with us today. So we have a chance to really talk to the group, and we're really going to focus on, the things that they've done in their careers and the lessons learned that we thought would be interesting to this group. So just by way of introduction, and sitting next to Jacob is David Deutsch, who has run his own firm for a very long time. And I was, when I had a chance to sort of think about today, I actually went back to a speech he gave at Columbia Business School many years ago in 1984. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a couple of minutes, because it's interesting to see how the young David Deutsch had a sense of vision about what he might be doing. And I just want to tie these things together a little bit. Next to him is Tony Caudle from Redtail Capital, the CEO there. Tony and I cross paths almost at Delphi Corporation. He was there for, I could say, Tony, you got there first, and I came and cleaned it up, but I'm not going to say it that way. No, but and among other things, Tony's a adjunct professor of both finance and business ethics. And it's a chance we had to go through next to him. Next to Tony is Bobby Blumenfeld, who is, iconic in this industry, right? One of the great leaders of ACG over the years. People have known him in that way. Now, a stalwart of generational equity in AIC, and we'll have a chance to get Bobby's perspective on this. He tripped on the way over here, but he said he could.
This is research in the sports medicine industry.
Okay, all right.
Feel it.
And then finally, Ramsey Goodrich from Carter Morris. We'll have a chance to chat with him as well. So we'll try and make the next hour interesting to everybody here as we go through this. But first, I want to talk with Jacob Voorhees. Okay, so the lawyer's got to take a phone call? Is that the... I'm just joking around. So Jacob, one of the things when I was reading about you and getting to know, and I'll have a few things to say later on tonight at the awards ceremony when we give you your award more formally. But you chose to sort of start your official family bio by saying, "Hey, I was born on a dairy farm, the son of a couple of hippies." Right, and I guess that's, you can't, you got to start with that, right? So give me a sense of really what your beginnings were, how you started out, and kind of what led you into the career that you found yourself in.
Yeah, I mean, the way we do our bios and our website and whatnot is, get relational, get personal quickly. And, it's true. I was born on a dairy farm in northern Iowa. Both of my parents were kind of hippie nomads that, met on a train in Spain. And they're just, kind of free spirits. And I always really thought that I'd be a Iowa farmer the rest of my life. And that was the goal. I went into college to be a veterinarian, to save some money and on the farm. And, then I kind of fell backwards into investment banking. It was just happenstance where my college advisor knew an MD at an investment banking firm that worked with 5 of the 6 largest dairy companies in the world. And they wanted a a dairy farmer investment banker. And so it was really fun being in those initial meetings where, they're all looking to you instead of the MD with like 30 years experience. And you're like, why are you looking at me? I don't even know what a P&L is. So it was fairly non-traditional. I mean, growing up, it was a really small dairy, about 35 milking cows, so we didn't have a lot of money. And so it was always, scrimp and save wherever you can. And, it just was a fortunate occurrence in my life. There's a lot of choices I could have made along the way that didn't end up in investment banking for sure. At one point I was going to start a hoof trimming business in California, but it was a long meandering path to get to where I am today.
Well, I think we're all the product of our experiences, right? Our life experiences. How, as you think, looking back, how do you think, growing up on an Iowa dairy farm, right, and with parents that weren't exactly pushing you into investment banking, how do you think that influenced where you are today? What are those life lessons that you bring to where you are today, looking back?
Well, I mean, it wasn't just investment banking. I mean, they weren't really pushing me to go to college. When I told them that, hey, I'm going to the best vet school in the U.S., they're like, oh, is that a community college near here? It wasn't like something that they knew about. But I think that, I know right when I got to New York and started working as an analyst, and you're working those 100-hour plus weeks, it was easy. I mean, I was working that since I was 5 years old, getting up at 3 a.m. to milk the cows, coming back, only in this case I didn't have to smell like manure anymore. And so it was actually, kind of refreshing. And I heard everyone like complaining, everyone in the bullpen like, about the hours. I'm like, this is a piece of cake, guys.
So you got part of your early part of your career. You landed at Arthur Andersen.
Yep.
And I think you landed at Arthur Andersen at a time that, the government essentially took them down, right, for the Enron, their Enron relationship, right, which is, I think some of us think probably, at least I do, I'll express my opinion, like sort of one of the more unfair corporate events, in kind of the history of restructuring and accounting and the things that we do, right? There were, but then, so how did you navigate that, right? I mean, here's a guy who's kind of made it, right? You've made it from the farm to a place like Arthur Andersen in the tech part of the world. How did you navigate that when that firm began to fall apart?
I mean, I was lucky enough that I was only 24, 25 years old. So maybe it's just youthful and experience. I thought it was a really fun time. It was basically a business school case study, and for anyone that wasn't there, you're getting blast voicemails every morning from the CEO saying everything's fine, and there's people running down the aisle with like papers flying. It was like from like a dramatic movie, and I'm going to KPMG, I'm going to Deloitte, like people just grabbing people. It was exhilarating just to kind of be a part of it and get that voicemail every morning and just laugh to yourself and be like, wow, this is corporate America, huh? But it was a fun time, and it was actually, if that hadn't happened, again, another fortunate occurrence, we wouldn't have founded Capstone Partners with my partner, because we worked together at Andersen. So, we took that company from 2 to 250 people and had a really successful exit. If Andersen didn't go down, that probably never would have happened.
Right. I think that's an interesting place, right? I mean, because I think that's one of the lessons that comes out here, right? It is, at the end of the day, all about relationships, right? And it was that relationship you forged in the fire,
yeah,
right, that allowed you all to go out and, but I'm also interested in how you think about yourself from an entrepreneurial perspective, right? And you can say, okay, I was in my mid-20s, I had nothing to lose, so I'll go do this. I hear that part, but there's a whole lot of 20-somethings that don't go out and and form a capstone,
yeah,
right? And or even think about how to do it, nor have the experience level coming from a dairy farm in Iowa. I mean, I'm very kinship to Iowa. my husband grew up there. I've spent, 25, 30 years going back to Iowa, and with all, friends and family members there. And I'm a Midwesterner by nature, as most people know. I'm a big believer in that. And you sort of went from that space, not just to Anderson and then formed Capstone, but you sort of jumped your career in Boston, right? My daughter went to school at BC, and I spent a bunch of time in Boston. I have friends there. I had an office there for a long time doing things. Boston. My brother-in-law grew up in Marblehead Neck, so I know the area really well. But Boston's a long way from Des Moines, right? So I'm just curious, how you sort of a very different set of life experiences. So do you think you're just the kind of person who can, kind of navigate through very different places and kind of cultures and backgrounds, or how did you think about it?
Well, I mean, I think from the entrepreneurial aspect, just growing up on the dairy farm, it was me and my dad. We were the employees. So you got to understand from a really early age, the good and bad that comes with entrepreneurship. But I think it also created this attitude within me, and even my partner at Capstone when we were starting, when Anderson was going down and we were starting Capstone, he kind of pointed me in the chest and goes, "You're a terrible employee." And I was kind of like, "Thanks." And he's like, "Every time I tell you to do something, your gut instinct is to do the opposite because you don't like being told what to do. That's the entrepreneurial gut. Like, let's go do this." And so I think part of that was just, the attitude I grew up with my parents. But the other part was, I mean, we had a 35-cow dairy in Iowa. We, qualified for food stamps every year, but we were too proud to use them. And then when I was living in New York, I didn't have any money. I was living in my car. So when you're living in your car in a station in New Jersey for, 4 months, you know where the bottom is, and you're not afraid of it. And so, there was no risk I wasn't willing to take. And I knew that my work ethic, I was gonna succeed, hopefully. If not, I'd find something else to do.
Well, sitting right next to you, David Deutsch is another guy who is entrepreneurial, founded his own place. And I've known David for a long time over the years. He hosts a lot of great gatherings. He has a very unique way of bringing people together from a business development relationship perspective. It's, I think, been kind of a keystone in our industry. Everybody knows about David and his gatherings and the people that come there and what they do. And I looked at David, and when I looked back at the things you've done, I went back and found you didn't make it too difficult to find, but I found the speech you gave at Columbia Business School, where were chosen by your peers to give the graduation address, right? And one of the things that jumped out at me was the following paragraph. You said, "Business school taught us," and this is, by the way, in 1984, so a few years ago. You said to the audience, "Business."
I was 10.
It says, "Business school taught us how to evaluate situations for ourselves. How to pick stocks, how to pick jobs. We're smart enough to determine our own environment, resources, alternatives, and constraints." I thought about you when I was reading the speeches from 1984, right? He says, "We're able to make informed choices now. Sure, but we'll need lots of guidance. We all should have trust, but we need guidance. We need to trust our instincts and select the career path that leads us to our own version of success." So as you sit here today in 2025, looking back at something you said 40 years ago, right, to folks, in terms of David, in terms of your, what your vision was, did you looking back, did the 2025 version of David, and do you think the 1984 version knew where he was going?
I think people often refer to the great Mike Tyson quote, everyone has a plan until they punch you in the face, or until you get punched in the face. Not that any of us have been punched in the face too much, but but life twists and turns, and there are opportunities and transitions, and so there's a lot of plan, and yes, you know, a lot of gotten to where I thought I might have gotten to, but not without movement from firms to firms and through various up and down economies, you know, and then it's up to you to make the best of those transitions. You know, I think none of us could have predicted exactly where we'd be today, but you know, hopefully we've navigated those transitions well. But by the way, I can't go on too much further without saluting you, Jacob, and thank you, Jack, and you know, and Ramsey and Bobby and Tony and everybody for being here. It's, you know, salute to everybody. It's really great to be among this group.
Thanks, David. Well, hey, next to you is Tony Caudle, who came up through the corporate world, and through Detroit and through the automotive. You know, I grew up in Detroit, so I feel a lot of connection there. And Tony, in the experiences you've taken, I want to focus on a couple things. I mean, you now lead Redtail, but you know, you've also spent a lot of time teaching other people. It's been a big part of your life. And you've focused on not just finance, but on business ethics. Take a second and talk, if you would, about your passion on those topics and how that sort of links into the things you learned over your career.
Thank you, Jack. And yes, this is a really important part for me, at business ethics. It's a passion that I have, and especially in a time such as this, right? So many times I think we take for granted the importance of honesty, integrity, trust, especially as relates to the construction of a deal. So what drives that? I'm also an ordained minister, right? So as a minister, sometimes we have the reputation of speaking too long, so I'll try to keep that brief at this time. The reason why I teach business ethics is, given the things that I've seen over my career, it's important to give back to the community, to students. I teach at Fordham University. I've been doing this for the last 7 to almost 8 years at the Gabelli School of Business. And really teaching students to understand the importance of what it means to be honest and have strong integrity within the marketplace. That's one of the things I think that's important as we reflect on Tom Farrell. He was a man of faith, right? He's someone who really valued the integrity and the trust within the marketplace. And given those ethos, I think that's important and really something that has really driven me throughout my career as well.
Thanks. Next to you, Bobby Blumenfeld, who, you know, has been, you know, in the New York area certainly, and in this industry, Bobby, pretty iconic, right? You know, your stewardship of ACG here was pretty legendary, but you've also done a lot in the business world and a lot of advising, and now you sit as a senior advisor to generational equity. You're involved in leading AIC. You know, if you could point to the 2 or 3 things that you think have been, you know, most instrumental in your career, what would they be?
Well, first of all, congratulations on joining our small little team here for the Thomas Farrell Award. And I was wondering if I saw your parents, because I grew up a couple miles from the Woodstock Festival. Okay. So that's the original gathering of hippies back in 1960.
It feels a little bit like that SNL Four-Timers Club, doesn't it?
We have the right jackets? Okay. So, you know, I always look at my underpinning, and I always think of myself as a third-generation retailer. I grew up in the men's retail industry, up in the Catskills in New York, in a business that my dad bought. I learned a lot through him, through his mentorship. Actually, he's 98, so he continues to provide that. But growing up in a failing business that, when you're trying to feed your kids, meant a lot to me, and how to keep going. And that's all one of my philosophies of, no matter what happens, just keep walking, just keep going, moving forward. A little hard today, but keep moving forward. And through that, fortunately, failure meant success with a large 250 retail stores, generated a public company and all that. And I had the opportunity to work with business owners around the country. and business owners typically that were not in great financial shape, having problems, and looking for the answers of how they can succeed. And just by doing that, and then understanding that, it's more than just working with the business owners, it's the employees that work for many years in little towns around America. And so everything I do, I always, look at, who's benefiting from this. Certainly we're helping the business owners, whether through an M&A transaction or whatever, but we're also helping those employees move forward. So, that's sort of my underpinning. And so everything else I've done is, can we leave a lasting purpose of what we do? Can we help people? Can we mentor the next generation? And every year I look to take a couple of students that, and teach them about the industry, because back in those retail days, I never knew any of this existed. I never even knew about networking because I didn't have to know about it. But later on, that's where I really got motivated, met a lot of people, and even today I look at, okay, what don't I know? There's so much out there that it's like, wow, you just, whether you want to get into AI or Bitcoin and all those other things that you don't even know about, and it's that curiosity that drives you forward. And this is a great industry. It's an industry that I've found through all my 15 years at ACG, running about 800 events, is that it's an industry of people that really care. And they care about each other. They care about doing the right thing. They care about it as an industry and helping others. And that's why I love, being part of this industry. So.
And last but not least, Ramsey Goodrich. Ramsey, like what Bobby does as a senior advisor of generational equity, you have really focused a good part of your career, and now as managing partner of your investment bank, you focus on generational equity. You focus on giving advice to entrepreneurs and families. That certainly resonates with me because for the last 10 years at Birch Lake, our private capital advisory firm, I came from a world of distress, but interestingly enough, our firm has, over the last 10 years, really evolved into primarily advising growth companies and investing in growth companies and working with entrepreneurs and founders. And so I sort of, your story resonates with me. But I sort of like to ask you, in terms of, as you think about, what got you into that niche? Why did you end up there? You could have ended up a lot. You've got a pretty stellar set of credentials through starting with Chase and other things you've done over the years. You could have ended up, being in a very different place than you are now. So why did you end up where you ended up?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. And like everyone else, honored to be up on stage with this bag of misfits. We know each other too well here. No, and I think it's a great question. I think you've got to go back and take a look from several, decades ago. The industry has exploded. And if you go look at the private equity industry as a key indicator of where the investment banking and the deal making has really gone, I ran the financial sponsors group for a Wall Street firm back in the late 90s, where I covered 53 different private equity funds. And why do I know it's 53? I still have the laminated spreadsheet of 53 lines long, 14 columns wide, of the entire middle market private equity universe at that time. 53. And you sit there and go, well, hold on a second, there's 6,700 private equity guys. So it's become the maturation process over the last 30 years. And the areas of specialization now has become so important. So that now you have to follow your passion more than anything else. And for me, it was passion. I realized after JP Morgan Chase, Paribas, I'm not a corporate guy. I'm not a billion-dollar guy. I'm not a public company guy. I loved working with the entrepreneur, the business owner, the family business owner, who is great at making a widget or doing a dairy farm or manufacturing something that nobody else can, and saying, well, how do we really make this something worthwhile? How do we create generational wealth out of something like this, where the transaction, no offense to our private equity guys, we love them, but that's just another transaction, right? Nobody's getting hired or fired or have a reputation based on one bad deal. If you're a CEO of a public company, you've been brought in to do a deal, and that's it. If it's when we talk to our founders and families, We don't talk about what dad would think or my kids would think. We talk about what your grandparents would think and what your grandkids are going to think. And all of a sudden, if you zoom out a little bit, it becomes a really important thing. So to answer your question directly, it was all about passion and really finding that niche that says, this is what we're really good. We've been in business now for 38 years. For 30 years, we were a full-service investment bank to the middle market. Can anybody here tell me what that means? Because I can't, because it's such a nebulous term. Now, all of a sudden, it's sell-side expertise for families and founders doing their once-in-a-lifetime transaction where value means more than money. And all of a sudden, that focus has really allowed us to do some really cool stuff. But it's all about passion and really making a difference there.
Well, I want to get back to passion, but I have to follow up on what you just said, because it's some things that I always find fascinating, and that is dealing with people on a generational thing. I'm going to ask Bobby and you this question, and everyone else can jump in too. But when you're working with someone and you're saying, okay, there's a monetization opportunity here, right? I remember back in this was just before the 2008 debacle. I had a sister-in-law and her husband who had founded a phenomenally good software company back then. Before AI can just do it in 10 minutes, they actually took a year or two and put something together. And they found a way to have, and they basically developed a way for insurance companies to communicate with each other as they process claims across multi-tiered insurance things. That was their niche. And they became the principal communicator. And they built a very large business at it. And I remember going to them because I believed that there was going to be a problem, looking ahead when the buck was broke and things happened in the markets. And I said to them, you really need to sell this. And it was like, well, we don't want to sell this. And I said, yeah, but you need to, because you can monetize it now and you probably can make a couple $100 million. I said, a year and a half from now, maybe the value of this thing may be very different than what it is today. There's an opportunity. You need to go do this. And they didn't want to do it. And I said, and I was at Skadden still at the time, and I said, you need to go do this. And they said, all right, we'll think about it. And I got one of our senior M&A tech partners out in Palo Alto to represent them, and they went and they did the deal. And he told me later that they were one of the best M&A clients he'd ever had, because they really didn't want to sell. They really wanted to keep the company. And every time the other side tried to pull something off, they simply walked away because they didn't want to do it. And the larger company kept coming back, and this happened 3 or 4 different times, and they honestly didn't want to sell. And they ultimately did sell. They did monetize. It made a difference for them from a generational wealth perspective. But how do you get that to work? Because I find 2 things about things. Number 1, people don't want to sell. Number 2, they want the company they sell to be managed the way that they ran it. Because the advice I always give people is like don't look back. Yeah. Like, maybe you're going to have a consulting agreement for a year or 2, but you need to understand it's somebody else's business, not yours. How do you give that advice? How do you? I'm going to ask both you and Bobby. How do you help people approach that? Because it's, I think in generational, it's particularly difficult, right?
We spend months, if not years, with our clients before ever going to market, just for that reason. And we actually try not to use, and by the way, we all do this, so I'm just answering on behalf of all of us. But it's spending that time up front really managing expectations, number 1. And number 2 is really thinking about not using the word buyer, because that means the end of something. Or if you talk about an investor, that means the beginning of something. But rather trying to figure out who the right partner is for the company going forward. We're indifferent if it ends up as a private equity portfolio company platform, a bolt-on, a strategic, a capital raise. Doesn't matter to us other than who's the right partner for the company. So if you spend enough time up front really understanding what the definition of success is, I think you can come up with a much better outcome. The secret, and I think hopefully you guys agree with this one, nobody takes the highest price. They take who's the right partner for the company going forward. If there's something stupid out there, yeah, take the money. But normally, it's if we do our job right in a competitive auction process, you get to a fairly narrow range of valuation. And then it comes down to, who do I like better? Who do I trust? Who do I think is going to do well with this company going forward?
Okay, Bobby?
Yeah, I think also, I start way in the beginning of saying, let's picture what this looks like when it is sold. Let's look at the different situations of how it could be sold, whether you have to stay on. I have a case now, it's a younger seller, and I said, who hated running the parts of the business that weren't sales, all the HR and the financials and all that stuff. Loves relationships, loves selling. And I said, this may change the way you look at business. And today, we sold it to a private equity firm. He's now enthused. He's out there looking at new companies to buy. He's out there focusing just on relationships and revenue, which he really likes. So in a situation like that, it really works. For an older seller, it's let's picture what it looks like once you sell. And let's take out the golf component, because you can only play golf so much, or even skiing. But what does this look like? Giving back to the community, charities, getting involved with your church, or things like that, grandkids and all that. But let's picture that in your mind before we even get to, can I sign the agreement to sell? Because no one wants to see a deal fall apart, at the last minute because they changed their mind. So they really need to see that picture there.
So, please go ahead, Tony.
No, I would say that to dovetail off of what Bobby just mentioned, I think transparency is very important. That's part of the educational process. That's part of the ethics of a deal as well. It's really learning and understanding what is the intentionality of the seller, for example. Is he really willing to sell right now? Or does he have in the back of his mind that I really don't want to give up this company until maybe 12 months down the road, right? They may not necessarily share that information up front. So part of your job is really trying to extract that information from the seller in full transparency. So that's been our experience. So that's helped a lot of our clients through that we represent on the buy side, that there's clarity in terms of the company that they're buying. Is the seller ready to actually sell right now? That's part of our process.
I just wanted to reflect on one or two things that Ramsey and others have said. When Ramsey said, effectively, we're here to find you a partner, the expression that we use very, very often is to find you, our client, the right parent partner. There is number one, there's this notion of partnership and working, not necessarily a wholesale sale, but rather something that looks more like a partnership. But there is a new higher authority. So there is different reporting, there is a different management structure, there is a notion of taking a step back. So it's that perfect balance, hopefully, of parent and partner. As to relationships and the work that we do over the longer term, I think John Whitehead of Goldman Sachs, who famously the two Johns, John Whitehead, John Weinberg, who really built the modern Goldman. I think it was John Whitehead who created this expression, we're long-term greedy, or we're running a get-rich-slow scheme. That's what I often think I do, and my firm does. If you don't mind 10 seconds of a quick example, we completed a transaction that happily is one of those nominated for tonight. I met the client in 3rd grade. I was 9. The gal was 9. So talk about a long-term relationship, and we were engaged by the client 5.5 years ago into a transaction that closed 6 months ago. So truly long-term relationship. Know that gal's parents, siblings, children, everything about maximizing the value that others have used. It's not, value is more than money or different than money. It's maximizing every other objective of that client. So, the Peerless Group that we once sold to Illinois Toolworks, the Zielsdorf family's primary objective was they were the largest employer in Sydney, Ohio. Make sure that ITW doesn't move the plant out of Sydney. So those things that transcend best bid.
So Tom Farrell was known for a lot of things, but one of the things he was known for, as much as I think anything, was his big bear hug of passion. The guy was passionate about everything. And he was passionate about his faith, he was passionate about his friends, he was passionate about his business, he was passionate about his clients. And it's interesting to me that if you think about the conversation we've had in the last 30 minutes so far, with each of these award winners, unprompted by me, each of them have talked about being passionate. And I share with them the view that, when people ask me at our firm or generally when I'm asked, what makes for success, what can someone do to be make a difference in business, I start with that. I start with the word, you have to be passionate. right? You actually want to wake up in the morning being excited about what you're going to do, even on those difficult days, right? I also say, you need to be reliable, right? Someone, when you're working with people, you need people that are passionate, and you hopefully have people that are intellectually curious, because those people intellectually curious go figure things out on a proactive basis, because you want people to be proactive, right? And you need them to be reliable, because the unreliable people in business are among the most dangerous. It's very difficult running an organization if you don't know what you're getting on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, And as leaders, you learn to winnow those people away, because they're, So I have a different question about passion, because I'm not going to ask you, are you passionate? Because you all are, about business and about your lives. I'm going to ask you a slightly different question, which is, how do you inculcate passion in your organization, among your team? Do you go find it? Do you have to recruit it? Do you create it? So Jacob, starting with you, how do you make, you founded and you ran a firm that really was an extraordinarily successful business, right? That required people being passionate in doing what they're doing. How do you make that happen?
Well, with the Navigate, my most recent business, the passion comes from, it came from me just feeling like I had ownership and agency every day. Like, I was not, just a cog in the corporate wheel. And one of the things that we did a little differently when I started my latest firm is we were very generous with equity. Like, everyone in the firm's an equity holder, a sizable equity holder, and has the agency to make their own decisions. So they're making decisions like business owners. And you come to the office with kind of a different attitude when, maybe we don't need the snacks this week, because that's coming out of the bonus pool, or you get just a little bit of a different attitude. And I think that's been really helpful. But I think just creating an environment that, like you said, the last couple of times I left my job is because I woke up in the morning and was like, you know what, today's gonna suck. And that's both times I changed my careers. And so you have to create that environment where people jump up in the morning and are excited to come into work versus it feeling like an obligation. Because when it feels like an obligation, you should just change your job.
So Tony, you're a minister amongst everything else. I have to ask you about passion. Do you recruit it? Do you teach it? How do you create? You all have it, and it's necessary for success. How does it work in your organization?
So sometimes when you think about passion, what I like to do is look for different various character traits that people have. Sometimes passion is something you can't necessarily teach, but you can inspire. So it's hard to really inspire people that may not have the traits to absorb what it is that you're trying to teach them or to inspire them. So when I ran various businesses, I think about my time at Comerica Bank. I started the investment banking practice at Comerica Bank through Comerica Securities, which is my time in Detroit. I'm dating myself, this is right after the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act. So as you guys remember that many banks at the time were starting their investment banking practice. I was in Detroit and actually started the investment banking group for Comerica Securities at the time. And also I worked at American Express for Ken Chenault. So in terms of recruiting teams, you look really first for those character traits first. And that really has been a success because I think the leadership is what's important. Because one of the things I would say, I reflect on my time working for Ken. Ken was one of the most inspirational CEOs that I've ever met. I'm sure anyone else in this room can arguably say that. And the exposure that I had to him in many ways helped us continue to develop where I am today. I was very senior in my career at the time when I worked for Ken. He recruited me in to actually run the North American Strategic Planning Group. So I think those skill sets, that foundation is important. And then the ability to be able to translate that to others and inspire them to do good as well, I think makes a difference.
I think you can also be very intentional about it, right? When we hire, fire, recruit, reward, recognize, promote, and bonus based on 5 core values. Insatiable curiosity, You know, you would have to have that insatiable curiosity to dig deeper, to drive harder, running through walls, whatever, whenever, wherever, right? You just got to get it done. Team player, we all are team players, both internally with our clients and with external, but it's a different level when you talk about it here. Engaging personally is one, you've got to have a personal relationship with clients, with your referral sources, with everything else. So you can actually, and when we go out and recruit, that's the final interview. If you've made it to me, you have the technical skills, you have the resume, you have the deal experience. My hour-and-a-half interview is nothing but, tell me about how you demonstrate and emulate 5 core values for us. And then every quarter, we sit down with every employee and say, are you doing it? And if not, this is what you need to get going. And if not, sorry. But Tony, you're absolutely right. It can be inspired, and it's contagious, and it's infectious, and all of a sudden, if you're passionate about what you do, it starts to snowball, and it becomes really fun to do deals, right? I don't go to work every day. I got to go play. This is excellent.
I mean, I find, to your point, Ramsey, you know, passionate people don't quit in place, right? Right. One of the most toxic things you have in organizations are people that are quitting in place, and you have to figure out that until you figure out that that's what they've done, right? And passionate people tend not to do that, right? They tend to. So you do. So and I think your point of having quarterly checkups on, you know, firm culture across all the team, right, is an important part about this.
But I think it has to go beyond. Most core values are honesty and integrity, and if you're not honest, I'm not hiring you, right? Or I'm certainly not going to put you in front of a client. Integrity, that's a table stake. That's a price of admission. That's not something you aspire to do.
Absolutely.
Pro tip, though, there's some things you can't train for. I found that you might not be able to adjust in people. So, I mean, you can't train for intelligence. You can't train for energy. You probably can't train for passion. People have it or they don't. So on the evaluation end of the spectrum, that's where it matters most. Actually, Jack Welch is famous 4 E's and a P. It was the P that he looked for in hiring any general manager of any business for GE. Do they or don't they have that passion?
But you know, passion comes in different forms. You know, in the organization, it could be you know, top down. If you were working for Warren Buffett, boy, you got, you know, passion for being part of that because of.
So I'll modify the theory only to say that I think people may not have the passion where they are and maybe can find it elsewhere, find it in a different role, find it in a different organization.
And part of that could be the mission of the group, whether it's a nonprofit or a profit. It could be in various companies I've been involved with where it's not the C-suite that provides the passion. It's the workers in there that love working together. Mm-hmm. It's a common mission. You know, we got to get this out by whatever. We have to make this by whatever. And they're driven by that. But it is sometimes around camaraderie that creates that passion. I know people that, even in businesses that were closing, that they'd stay to the end because they have passion for the mission of the company, of what it produces, and the people around them to support. So it's a lot of different, you know, and I can think about companies that I was involved with that had that built in. Generational, by the way, has that built in.
And I'm only suggesting that I kind of think there's either a fire in one's belly or there isn't. That's all.
Well, sometimes you can help create that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's part of one's virtue. So if you have that, you either have it or you don't have it. So that's what really drives you, and that becomes inspirational to others.
Sure.
You know, Ramsey, you talked about culture and values. You know, it's interesting. I remember when we founded Birch Lake 10 years ago, we started by looking with the initial team by looking at a deck that Netflix had put out. And some of you may have read it, right? They're 125-page, PowerPoint on value and culture and how they were thinking about it at Netflix. And that inspired us to sort of figure out what our values were. And you know, we published them on our initial website. And they were probably way too thorough in the sense the team picked 15 and we had like 4 or 5 principles around each of them and all that stuff. And in connection with our 10th anniversary that's coming up this year, and our launching of our new website around the 10th anniversary, the team sort of said, well, you know what, we need to pick 5. right? Which was great to hear. And maybe one of the most, to me, inspiring things was with our team was watching the team over a period of a couple of months having conversations saying, because I said, like, I'm not picking the 5. What are the team's got to pick the 5, right? What are they? And having that conversation around what really, and listening to the conversations which were passionate about, how we think of ourselves, right? You have to build that in organizations, right? And it is what creates excitement. So switching gears a little bit from passion to mentorship, another thing that Tom Farrell was known about was being a phenomenal mentor. And I know each of you believe in mentorship and believe in paying things forward. It's kind of a fundamental thing we talk about at M&A Advisor, the importance of people who are honored by this organization, of reaching out and extending a hand to younger people in the organization, in the industry, and helping them move forward. Even creating channels and early on encourage people to come into the business to begin with. But I'd like to put a little twist on it by asking, starting with you, Jacob. I'm going to put you on the hot seat because you're our current honoree, so we're going to start with you. But one way of explaining mentorship, I think, is for everyone to sort of say, hey, if we're all honest about it, we all had mentors. There was a mentor or 2 mentors in our lives that made a difference, and that made a difference in where we are today. And so, paying it forward is because somebody did it for us. So if you would, I'm going to ask each of you briefly to share, pick one, and tell us a little bit about that mentorship experience that was really formative in your life. So I'm going to start with you, Jacob.
Well, probably the most important mentor I had, both for good and bad reasons, was my partner at Capstone. When we started that, he was 32, I was 25. We had no business starting an investment bank. But we grew together, and I learned a lot from him on, how to build a firm, how to be a good banker, how to connect with people. I was very much still more an introvert back then, and I've gotten better. But but at the same time, you could also step back and just learn, the faults, the things that you really appreciate, but that you can change. Because no one, even I mentor a handful of folks at my prior firm, and then kids looking to get into the industry. You don't have all the answers. You got a good amount of them, but you're just hoping someone to guide someone in the right way, and then there's just areas around the edges that they have to learn for themselves. But that was for me personally, it was just we spent 20 years as partners together, so it was a match, a dysfunctional match made in heaven, where we both learned from each other. I learned a lot from him, but we both learned how there's certain things that we wouldn't do that we were mentored to do.
David?
Well, first of all, I think mentorship and the notion of apprenticeship is everything. You don't learn investment banking from any book. The Rosenbaum book is great, but you need a great mentor to really teach you how deals are done. But in terms of mentors, also for those that are younger in the audience, collect them like data points. There's no one mentor. There are a number of them that might teach you different things and give you a different sense of the landscape. Quickly, I think of 3 of them, actually. I think of a guy who was, Michael Grattel is here somewhere. I met Michael when I was at Lehman Brothers. Mike Stippo, who I don't think Mike went to high school, but was the world's greatest bond trader when I was on the bond desk at Lehman Brothers, would throw his arm around me, Deutsch, here's the way the world works. That was a certain kind of a mentor. Later on, Dort Cameron at Drexel Burnham, he and I and another guy began Drexel's commercial paper business within Mike Milken's high yield bond business, and later into corporate finance. So many different things learned from from Dort rather, about how the world works and how to relate to clients. Dort taught me, watch this, David. I'm going to tell this person, I'm going to call them back tomorrow at noon and deliver whatever it was. And sure enough, tomorrow, without fail, that call would be made, and tomorrow, the delivery was made by noon that day. A different kind of a lesson. And third quick lesson, and maybe this was more in diplomacy, later in my life, John Whitehead was a dear friend, and I brought him on to chair the advisory board of the Museum of American Finance, which is a Smithsonian affiliate and all of that. John is just the world's great. He's passed away, unfortunately, I want to say 12 years ago at this point, 15 years ago. But just John was everything about how do you build, this long-term greedy thing. How do you build truly long-standing relationships, true quality in everything that you do? All of that transcends any given transaction. So, but different lessons from different mentors, all equally and incredibly valuable.
Tony?
Yes. So I would say that growing up in my career, obviously I've had an opportunity to meet a lot of influential people along the time frames I mentioned to you, Ken Chenault. But I think about my time at Ford Motor Company in Dearborn. John Devine, who was the CFO of Ford at the time, who became CFO of General Motors, was a significant influence to me during that time period. I was actually working in corporate treasury at the time at Ford Motor Company. So the skill sets, understanding what it takes to be successful in the industry, that really appreciated. I was really appreciated by that in terms of the time that he took, and the introductions that were made really went a long way. So I think overall, as I think about that, to much is given, much is expected. So as I have been mentored over the years, it's time to get back. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm teaching at Fordham. So to inspire students and to teach students in terms of some of the challenges that I've had in the industry over the years, because I can be honest with you, it hasn't been easy. But I would say that through a sense of resilience, and I always say to my higher father here, who has gotten me through many challenges and many days, to have worked in corporate finance for almost 30 years now, and I've seen it all. One of the things I will say is it's important as I teach students in terms of understanding what does it mean to be, again, I reflect back on honesty and integrity, but I like to teach students in terms of what it means to be honest in a deal. So you teach financial engineering, I teach valuation. As we all know, valuation can be heavily driven by intrinsic value, right? You can model a DCF model. You can easily give a company a 10x multiple where it really only deserves a 5x multiple. I think we all know that. So
No, I've never seen that before. No, never.
Well, so again, as I teach integrity, right, I really teach students to say, hey, let's make sure that as we're presenting, let's be honest. Like we can teach you to financially engineer something to make it look much bigger than what it is, or we can take the honest approach to say, this is really the real value of how this company is, and this is how it should be presented to customers.
Bobby?
Yeah, so I've had dozens of mentors in my life in different stages of what I've done, and I like to think today I've been mentored to dozens of students that have now gone into business. But just thinking of some that I know, Jack, you may know, Jerry Buccino, who was one of the founders of Turnaround Management Association, how much I learned from him, from a guy named David Kuhn, who just retired as vice chairman of wealth management at JP Morgan, who got me involved with ACG. Actually went to a meeting, and 30 minutes later, I'm on the executive committee. It's like, wow, that was easy. But I'm going to skip all over my father, his partner, and all that built a business, but really go to my grandmother. And my grandmother lived to 100. She worked till she was about 88, running 2 retail stores in hotels up in the Catskills. And every day she'd go to work, no complaints, move forward. If it was a problem, we'll get through it. The work ethic that she had, and just, the organic, just learning from, just being around her is really what created, which I think is important for everyone. I think everyone here has it, the foundation of who you are. And just like businesses, I always look at what's the foundation of the business. What does it mean after it's been sold to, 10 private equity firms? What's the foundation? Because the employees are there, and they have to believe in that foundation. So I encourage everyone. I'm sure you all have people that you've helped in business, and keep doing it, because there's so much. I thought I'd be working in a retail men's store someplace in America, and I didn't know this all existed out there, and that's what happens with a lot of students today, that they don't know what's out there. It's I'm going to be an accountant or an M&A advisor. Well, there's so much out there that, that Jack, you were a great lawyer, right? Look at where you are now. I mean, it's so different. Who would have thought that, right, back then?
Yeah, it's funny. I've never gotten any job I've ever applied for, and I've never applied for any job I've ever had. So it's finding those mentors and those people that share passion. To answer your direct question, there's two. One is a camp counselor that really affected my life for an epiphany moment in northern Quebec in a canoe halfway across the Continental Divide on an 8-week canoe trip. Longer story there, trust me. The other one is actually, like you, my business partner. Here it is. I met him at ACG out in Connecticut, and we've been partners now for 21 years. And just set the foundation and the right ethical way to do things, the right moral things to do, as well as all the passion and drive to do it. When we were talking about culture earlier and those 5 core values, when we sat down to actually put it on paper, they just flowed. And that was it. That's who we are anyway. We didn't have to think about it. That's the basis for everything. And so it was really interesting that, without getting too deep, definitely my business partner, and it's amazing what we've been able to do together.
So when Roger Aguinaldo and Steve Finney talked about putting this panel together, this is kind of a remarkable, in my view, sort of opportunity. We don't get to do this every year, right? So we have, 5 of the Farrell Award winners together. Part of the goal of this was to share with all of you and give you the opportunity to discern, as you listen to these stories, not just remembering who Tom Farrell was, but thinking about how people are successful in this business. Here's 5, stories, right? And I'm a guy who likes listening to people's stories. I think learning stories is important. And, and here's an opportunity as you think about this, to sort of see what, how different people got to the places they've got. All extraordinary careers, all deserving of the Farrell Memorial Award winner. We're going to be looking forward to honoring you tonight as this year's recipient of the award. But I also, it's funny, you talk about faith, Tony, and I'm a person of faith too, but you talk about, nature versus nurture. I think there's some important nurturing that goes on in our lives through mentors and others. But I also think there's something to be said about that nature piece. I think we're born, when he was on the dairy farm. Yes. There's a certain, he sort of, got that start. I remember, one of my first mentors, and some of you know me, you'll laugh when you hear this, but was an 8th grade counselor who wrote in my yearbook, his advice was, slow down and go. And you think about my life and think about things I've done and things about it, that's a good advice sometimes, right? Slow down and go.
Slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
So, I appreciate all of you in doing that. So, I think we'll end it on that note. I think there's probably not a better way of ending this conversation than talking about how mentorship has played a role in your lives and how we all collectively want to pay it back. So on that note, thank you all of you. Congratulations, Jacob, on tonight's award. We look forward to it. We'll all dress up, and some of us will put a tux on. I will, to come back and celebrate you on this dais later on this evening. All right?
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you.
We hope today's episode delivered actionable intelligence. We want to hear from the field. Share your questions or insights, leave a message on your favorite platform, or email us at editor@maadvisor.com. To secure your steady feed of premium M&A content, follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, and subscribe to our M&A Alerts email newsletter. Find the links in the description below or visit us directly at our website at www.maadvisor.com. I'm Roger Aguinaldo, founder and CEO of the M&A Advisor. Thank you for being part of the M&A Advisor community. Until next time, stay decisive, stay connected, and happy dealing.